This evening, we want to talk about how to rise above these current conditions that we're in and actually not only be able to maintain ourselves as we go through them, but actually to gain spiritually. Paramahansa Yogananda said that the season of failure is the best time to plant the seeds of success. And even though this isn't a failure in a personal sense, when we have a crisis like this worldwide pandemic and the change of conditions, uh, people all over the world are being asked to stay in their homes, to not go out, to not interact with other people. Obviously, there are difficulties from the illness itself. People are getting ill. Many people around the world are dying. And so one might say that this crisis is a worldwide crisis. Now, Master taught that a crisis like this comes because of mass consciousness. It isn't just random. It's the thinking patterns, the mental patterns, the feelings, the behaviors of the whole planet as a whole. And because there has been so much, one might say, greed and conflict and clashing of people, those negative thought patterns go out, and that creates a kind of a global magnetism. And a global magnetism will attract to itself the conditions that are in tune with that, one might say, world consciousness. So if the world consciousness is in conflict, if the world consciousness is sick, then the world consciousness attracts to itself something like this virus. So all karma is magnetically drawn to us in order for us to learn a lesson. That's the whole purpose of karma. It's God's way of helping us understand and change our behaviors. And so the world right now has drawn to itself these conditions in order to change its behaviors. Now, if we can change our behaviors and get more in tune with God during a time of karmic testing, then we really grow from that period. In fact, this period, both for the world and for many individuals, many of us joining this, this evening together, for many of us, this will be the greatest opportunity for growth, spiritual growth, that will occur in our lifetime. During times that are normal, times where we aren't really paying very much attention, we don't need to make changes, we tend, there's a very strong pull that people have to maintain the familiar. It even goes down to the laws of physics. So as Newton stated it, a body tends, it's the law of momentum, a body tends to stay in motion or stay still unless an outside force stops it. So think of this as our mental patterns. Our mental patterns tend to stay the same unless an outside force comes and forces us to change. So an example of this is that we might have a relatively bad diet that is unhealthy. And we just go along and don't think about changing it. But then if we get ill, that illness forces us to take a look at that behavior pattern and say, oh, I'm eating too much sugar, or I'm eating too much fast food. I should change my diet. And we change our diet to a healthier diet. So these karmic patterns that we have draw to us certain conditions, and through those conditions, we change. Now, if we ignore the conditions, ignore the change, that is needed, then what happens is then a stronger condition will come until we finally can't ignore it. And that's what's happened to the world right now, is we've been out of balance. The world has been behaving in an out of balance, quite ill way for a long time. We've seen it affect the environment. We've seen it affect relationships between people, between nations. We've seen it affect the economy. It's affected all kinds of things in our world, but we haven't had an outside force that's strong enough to make us want to change all of that. But now those conditions have changed. And so God has sent to us this virus. And well, I can't say God has sent it. God doesn't want to send a virus to us. God would love us to be happy, to be healthy, to be holy all of the time. Our misalignment with spiritual law, with natural law, has drawn to us a virus. That's a better way of saying it. And so we've drawn this to ourselves. And right now, in order to uplift the consciousness of the world, we have to start by working on our own consciousness. If we don't work on our own consciousness, how can we expect that others will work on their consciousness? If we don't follow the behaviors that are being asked of us to prevent the spread of this virus, staying home, washing our hands, wearing a mask if we go in public, if we ourselves don't do that, how can we expect others to do that? The change has to start with us. But this is a wonderful opportunity for us to change our consciousness. And so we should, at this time, be trying to meditate more deeply. We should be trying to think of others more, to be reaching out to others, obviously not physically, but call your friends, stay in touch with your family, try to be supportive to those who might need your support and energy. See, devotees have many, many more tools to deal with a crisis than most people. There was a time where a member who grew up here, and she didn't think that she was really absorbing. She wasn't trying to, take the teachings. She wasn't really meditating, anything like that. She just grew up in the environment of Ananda village. And she was about 18 or 19. She had gone off to college. And on one weekend, one of the people in her dorm, the dormitory of young women going to college, was in a car accident and died. And the other members, the other people living in the dormitory, just couldn't deal with it. They were just so upset, and they were freaking out, as the modern terminology goes. And this woman, not thinking that she had particularly absorbed spiritual things, she had absorbed the ability to stay centered when difficult things happened. And she became the primary source of strength for all of those other young women in that dormitory during a time of crisis. Well, you need to play that role now, because others will not have this strength, not have the teachings, not have the centeredness. The practice of meditation gives one a kind of a calmness and an ability to rise above the reactive process. And so you need to play the role of being a support to others during this time. As you do so, your own strength will grow. And so there are two things primarily that we need to do. The first is we need to keep our thoughts positive. Whatever you need to do in order to keep your mind positive, don't read too much negative news. Don't listen to too many negative things, because that will just draw the mind down, draw the thoughts down. The reason that all of that is being pumped in is people know that by uh, stimulating the negative feelings, people will pay attention to that. So most news media, I mean, to get some facts, that's okay. But most news media, the internet is trying basically to stimulate negative emotions so that you pay attention. So don't pay attention, because all that does, unless you're very strong, is produce an equal negative reactive process in your own self. So stay away from those things. Keep your mind positive. Use affirmations. Do a lot of chanting. Play music of a spiritual nature, so that you create an environment in your home while you're staying home that is calm and uplifted. And that will all help your mind. The other thing is the feeling nature that we have. Use your feelings at this time to try to be helpful and supportive of others. What do I mean by that? Think of others who may be going through a hard time. Think, for instance, of all of the healthcare workers throughout your city or your area in India, but all throughout India and beyond that, all through the world. Many of those healthcare workers are exhausted. They're risking their health, their very lives, in order to help people. So feel an empathy with them. Feel that you want to send them prayers. You want to send them a loving support. See, our thoughts, our feelings create a wave of energy. That's why we do healing prayers and send energy through healing prayers, is that wave of energy goes out and reaches the people that we send it to. And so think about those who are having a hard time. Do healing prayers for them. But most of all, send them your love, your appreciation, your blessings. Give them exactly what you would want to receive if you yourself were in that position. Imagine yourself in the position of a doctor in a hospital, caring for very, very ill people, people who are having the virus, and many of those people may have difficulties in surviving. Think of that person and what would they most want to receive. We had a friend who's a nurse in a big hospital in New York, which is one of the epicenters. And he said all of the medical staff are taking care of each other. So mentally take care of the workers and everyone, the poor people who are suffering much more than most people, the animals, everything in the world that's being affected by this. Send them your love. And especially be a channel through which Divine Mother can send them her love. She's doing that anyway, but when we ourselves serve as a channel for divine love, for positive thoughts, positive energy, then we ourselves will rise above this crisis, and we will end up, as I said, benefiting more spiritually during this time than any other time in our whole incarnation.
Namaste, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our living room, our home here in California. We're so glad that we can share this time, and we hope perhaps if it's possible, we can do a monthly broadcast and be with all of you in this way in the weeks and months ahead. I want to just, for my own delight, greet our dear friends in all of our different centers and those who are just watching independently, not part of a center, and up in the north in NCR and Panchsheel and Noida and West Delhi and Gurgaon, and our dear friends in Chennai and Bangalore and Pune and Mumbai and wherever Ananda devotees are, wherever you are that you're watching, we welcome you into our home, into our hearts, into our love of God. One of the things I was so inspired about from the way Swami Kriyananda taught us all these years was he always saw the big picture. He never got caught up in what's happening on the surface. Dive beneath the surface and see what's really going on. If you want to know truth, if you want to know truth of a world situation, don't just look at medical statistics and so forth, but what's really going on. If you want to know yourself, don't just look at physical aspects, your body, your personality, your mind, but go beneath that. Who are you really? And so looking at the crisis that the world finds itself in right now, let's, as Jyotish was saying, what are the underlying causes? Part of what's going on is the change of ages as well. The change from the age of matter and fixed thinking, which is Kali Yuga. Now we're moving into Dwapara Yuga. But remember, I was reading a very interesting article by a Vedic astrologer, and he said these first years of centuries of Kali Yuga, of Dwapara Yuga, are influenced very much still by Kali Yuga. So this is the Kali Yuga phase of Dwapara Yuga. And so there's tension, there's turmoil, new thought forms, new religious expressions, new ways of dealing with health and economy and political systems. They're all trying to emerge, but they're being pulled back. They're being in conflict with the thought forms of Kali Yuga. And so we really need to understand that this is an age of turmoil, and it is a war between emerging consciousness, expanded awareness, and the more limited way of perceiving reality. That's the hallmark of Kali Yuga, which just defined everything by form. Now we've moved into the age of energy, but it is not an easy transition to make. And so we need to understand that part of the reason these crises come because of the conflict, yes, but it's for people who have the good karma to perceive a deeper level of reality, who are looking for truth, and that includes all of us, all of Master's disciples, and those interested in his teachings. It's the opportunity for us to counterbalance the negative forces that are the retrograde forces that are pulling us back into more fixed, limited thinking, and to be able to move forward and into a more expanded, inclusive, unified vision of ourselves, of other people, of the planet, of the universe. And so really this is the opportunity. Nothing is accomplished. Growth is not made just by non-challenge. Growth occurs through transcending challenge on every level. Every level. If you want to create a great work of art, you don't just go in there and throw some paint on a canvas. You put out energy. You try to understand what images you're trying to capture. If you're wanting to overcome bad habits in your life, you can't just say, oh yeah, that's a bad habit, go away. You have to put out energy to overcome those bad habits. So, isn't it so? And so the same now for this battle we are faced in, which in a way the coronavirus is only a symbol. It's a symbol of the conflict, but or one might say more appropriately, it's the result of a certain line of thinking that has caused imbalance in the system, the environmental system, planetary system, economic system, social system, individual health system. So an imbalance has come by this conflict. And now we are the healers, don't you see? We are the ones, by at least being able to draw on Master's teachings and be able to draw his presence into our consciousness, we are the ones that can help to move society forward. Master said in Autobiography of a Yogi, I see my Kriya bonds, and let's expand that, my disciples, my devotees, my students. I see them like sparks of divine light all over the planet. And that was his mission, to weave a web of light surrounding, protecting, and uplifting this planet. And we are, each of us are a part, each one is a part of that web of light. And so we need to understand that what's going on now has deeper causes, not just from last year or 2 years ago, but for thousands of years of human ascension of consciousness and decline of consciousness has brought us to this point in human history. And so it's not something that we can deny. It's not something we can get mad about. Oh, my life is so disrupted. This is a part of a long story. And this is the chapter we find ourselves in now. And we each have a part to play, an important part to play for ourselves, for the people who are in our lives immediately, friends, family, co-workers, for our country, for our nation, and for the human race as a whole. Now, what are the challenges that we may be facing as individuals too? And how can we begin helping society by looking at the effect that the current crisis is having on our own life? Well, first of all, many of us are in isolation. And Jyotish and I have, because here at Ananda Village, we've been very scrupulous in keeping social distancing, sheltering in place, isolation, wearing masks and gloves in public, not going shopping in town and so forth. We have several people who do the shopping for all of the community. And it's actually wonderful to have that level of cooperation. We're very fortunate. But one of the things of being sheltered in place is people get restless. I noticed that, sadly, the level in some countries of domestic violence has gone way up while people are being sheltered in place. Well, why is that? Because people, they can maybe stay in their home, but they're restless. Their energy is pushing against it. They're not comfortable, as the saying goes, they're not comfortable in their own skins. And so they get angry and they get resentful and they strike out at someone in their home. And so how do we counter that restlessness? A friend asked us recently, through all this crisis, being sheltered at home, this person asked, I feel like I'm losing my devotion a little bit. And how can I balance that? And really the thought is, if we can conquer the restless mind, which leads us, it externalizes our consciousness. It makes us look for fulfillment outside of ourselves. Oh, if I could go to the mall. Oh, if I could go outside and do this or that. Oh, if I could go to a party or have people over. And so the mind, the restless mind, the monkey mind, wants to go out, wants to stimulate the senses. And it's a challenge for each of us to just interiorize the mind, not shut down, not crawl in our bed and pull up the covers and hide away from the world, but to simply begin through meditation, through inward chanting, through reading and listening to Master's words, Swamiji's words, to really consciously say, okay, I will be interiorized. I read a beautiful book some years ago by a Tibetan Buddhist nun. She was a Westerner, a British woman, but she, as a young woman, read about Tibetan Buddhism and must have been an awakened past life, was so drawn to that. She came to, at that time, India, because Tibet was still was shut down at that point. But she found a sect of Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhists, and she took training from them, and she joined a monastery. But then her teacher said, "You're doing very well, but you need to go off by yourself." And so she went up into the Himalayas. This was a Western woman by herself, and found a cave and lived there for 7 years. She had some help. The villagers, I think once a year she would bring her grains and so forth. She had a little garden, but part of their tradition was they make a little box, a little wooden frame on the floor of the cave. And before she got settled, she had someone build a door so the snow and the wind couldn't come in the winter. But she would sit in that box, that frame on the floor, for 8 or 10 hours a day, meditating, never leaving, never moving. And she was there for 8 years. And then I guess finally my mother thought, "You've gotten what you can." And in the middle of one day, there was a knock on her door, and it was an Indian official saying, "Your visa has expired," and she had to leave. But that was the end of her seclusion. But the point I'm making and sharing with all of you is, don't be afraid of cutting off external thinking. Enjoy it. The more you go within, the more you realize, I don't need anything outside myself. And just find ways to constantly be interiorizing your mind. Now, another thing that happens to us during these periods is we get worried, fear and anxiety and worry. But understand, we get, Jatish and I, many calls and letters. "Oh, I'm frightened. I'm having negative thoughts. I'm having bad dreams." I saw an article that many people are having strange dreams now, because the subconscious patterns of fear and anxiety are very strong in the world right now. So we need to counter that. Understand that fear, anxiety, worry, they're just thought forms. They're grooves that like a radio station, we can turn that on, we can look at all the bad news, and it activates those parts of our brain. And we're not saying to be isolated, don't look at news, ignore what's going on, but just try to be very mindful when your mind starts digging deeper those grooves of anxiety and worry or fear. Counter that with positive thoughts, with encouraging thoughts. We watch the videos from our wonderful work in Vrindavan, and Jaita was narrating them. And if you haven't seen them, please watch them. They're so inspiring. How the work continues, serving the widow mothers, serving the poor people in the streets, helping the stray animals. And Jaita said one line, "Not all sad stories have a bad ending." And she was talking about the stray animals, monkeys and dogs and cows that are dying in Vrindavan because people are in their homes and they're not feeding them. So our wonderful sevaks are going out and serving and helping even the animals. And so and that leads us to the third point. So I'll just end, when you start having those, you tune it into the station of worry, fear, and anxiety, change the station. Start saying, "We will get through this with the help of God. Overcome fear with faith. God is in charge. He's given us this exact situation. He knows, he, she, Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, they know what they're doing, and trust them. Don't think, oh, if I worry about it enough, it'll get better." It won't get better. It will get worse for you. So counter fear with faith. And then finally, another tendency during these times is to think about, oh, I have to protect myself. I have to think, do I have enough food stored? Do I have enough disinfectant wipes? Whatever it might be. But counter that by, as Jyotish was saying, think of others, pray for others. We saw a beautiful we heard a beautiful talk given by a man some years ago. His name was, he was a Romanian man, Richard Wurmbrand, and he was imprisoned. He was a Christian minister, and he was imprisoned by the communists in Romania and really tortured, put in solitary confinement for many years. And he said during that time, but he was finally released because of public outcry. And he and his wife, who was also separately imprisoned, they went around just speaking of the love for God. And even in that most dire of all circumstances, solitary confinement, being brutally tortured, no light, no sound in his room, all by himself, he said, I prayed for others. I prayed for other people who were in such situations. I prayed for Christian people who their faith was being challenged. And so we are not in those dire situations. We have the ability, if we remember, think of others, pray for others, do whatever you can, call people up on the phone. Yesterday, a woman called me and she was having very bad dreams and experiences. And I was so happy to be able to talk with her and share a lot of the things that we're saying to you right now. So we'll close with those thoughts because we want to leave time for meditation now. And so let's meditate together and let's start. We'll meditate for about 10 minutes together. And so that you can really bring into your conscious mind, subconscious, and superconscious mind these thoughts that Jyotish and I have been sharing with you this evening. So let's begin by getting into a nice position for meditation. Sitting upright, your spine relaxed, your shoulders relaxed, throat, brain, and calmly, with restful energy, focus your attention at the point between the eyebrows, Kutastha Chaitanya. And feel that the energy is moving up your spine from the base of the spine, touching each chakra, moving up, coccyx center, sacral, lumbar, dorsal, cervical center, the medulla and the brain. Feel a river of light and peace flowing up your spine, resting at the point between the eyebrows. With closed eyes, gently lift your eyes so that they too are focused there. Now breathe. And let's do this exercise. With each inhalation, feel that you are breathing in God's peace and love. With each exhalation, feel that you are expelling tension and worry. Let's do this silently together for a few moments. Now take a deep inhalation, tense your body, and throw the breath out. Once more, inhale. With alert, calm energy, focus at the spiritual eye with attention with your focused eyes. And feel that God's peace, His light, His joy is permeating your brain. And let's just sit quietly together now, filling our being with God's peace and love, His light and joy. Now, focusing once more at your spiritual eye, try to see light or imagine a beautiful radiant light there at the center of divine consciousness, and try to project that light out as though a searchlight going out into the world. We are all masters, sparks of divine light scattered throughout the world. And feel wherever there is fear or worry, project peace out into the world. Wherever there is want or lack or hunger, project a sense of comfort and care. Wherever there is anger or resentment, project peace and love. And wherever there is the darkness of materialism, project the light of divine consciousness. These are the true healers of humanity. And let's end now together by chanting Om, rubbing our hands together, raising them, chanting Om, and projecting divine consciousness out into the world. Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We send our love and blessings to each of you, and we hope we'll be able to join you in this way again soon.
God bless you.